One question before you go. If the parts of you that others called wrong were actually the parts that make you extraordinary, what would you do differently starting tomorrow? Comment. What would it feel like to stop being ashamed of the most powerful parts of yourself? Someone is using your shame against you right now, and it is working. They found the part of you that you hide, and they pressed on it hard. Your anger, your past, your failures, your desires, your nature. They did not attack you with facts. They attacked you with your own self-perception. And the moment you flinched, the moment you tried to explain or apologize, they won. Because shame only has power over the parts of yourself you have not yet claimed. The darkness inside you, the parts they call wrong, dangerous, too much, is not your enemy. It is the most powerful resource you have ever been talked out of using. This knowledge is for protection, not destruction. What you are about to learn will make your darkness impossible to use against you, ever again. From the moment you were old enough to understand disapproval, you were being trained. Trained to identify the parts of yourself that made others uncomfortable and bury them. Your anger, too much. Your ambition, threatening. Your sexuality, inappropriate. Your competitive drive, arrogant. Every natural part of your nature that was labeled wrong, you learned to be ashamed of it. And every person who ever shamed you knew exactly where to find it. Drop a comment. What part of yourself were you taught to be most ashamed of? That thing you just thought of? That is the exact handle they use to move you. Your employer, your partner, your social circle. Anyone who knows your shame owns a piece of your behavior. Not because you are weak, because no one ever showed you the alternative. The alternative is not becoming shameless. It is becoming the owner of your shadow. The man who owns his shadow cannot be shamed, because shame requires a gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. Close that gap, and the weapon jams, every time, in every hand. There was a philosopher who spent his life mapping this exact territory. He called it integrating the shadow. And Robert Greene took that map and turned it into the most ruthless strategic advantage a man can possess. Let me give you both, and let me give you them exactly as they were intended, without apology. Robert Greene spent decades studying the nature of power, and the nature of the human beings who hold it. He found something that ran beneath every study of power, every biography of the great and the ruthless. The most powerful people in history were not the most virtuous. They were the most integrated. They had looked at every dark corner of their nature and cleaned it, all of it. Become who you are by learning who you are. Become who you are by learning who you are, not who you were told to be, not who survives other people's comfort. Robert Greene spent decades studying the nature of power and the nature of the human beings who hold it. He found something that ran beneath every study of power, every biography of the great and the ruthless. The most powerful people in history were not the most virtuous. They were the most integrated. They had looked at every dark corner of their nature and claimed it, all of it. Become who you are by learning who you are. Become who you are by learning who you are, not who you were told to be, not who survives other people's comfort. Greene was drawing from Carl Jung's concept of the shadow, the parts of the self that are suppressed, denied, and weaponized by others. Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Greene operationalized that insight into the most practical, strategic framework for personal power ever documented. Here are the exact lessons. Take every one of them. Every man has a shadow, the parts of his nature that were labeled unacceptable and pushed underground. Aggression, desire, envy, ambition, pride, darkness. These are not flaws. They are forces. Suppressed forces do not disappear. They express themselves sideways, as self-sabotage, as eruption, as the leak you cannot explain. Greene documented Napoleon, a man of volcanic ambition who was taught repeatedly that ambition was unseemly in a Corsican of his birth. Napoleon did not suppress that ambition. He claimed it, owned it, aimed it, and it became the engine of everything. Comment: what force inside you have you been suppressing that, if aimed correctly, could change everything? That force is not a problem. It is a resource waiting for an owner. Shame is an engineering problem. It requires a specific structure to function. Close the gap yourself before anyone else closes it for you. That is the move. Comment: where is the gap in your own life right now? What are you performing that you are not? Radical ownership is the act of claiming every part of your nature, including the parts you were told make you dangerous. Greene documented how Machiavelli owned his darkness so completely that his name became a synonym for strategic intelligence. He was called evil by men who did the same things he described, but in secret, with shame, clumsily. Machiavelli was not more ruthless than his critics. He was more honest. And honesty about darkness is its own form of power. When you own your darkness publicly, in the right measure, it creates a field of psychological safety around you. Because people trust a man who is honest about what he is, and they fear a man they cannot shame. Your darkest qualities, when owned and directed, produce your most powerful outcomes. Greene studied 50 Cent's use of controlled aggression. Not suppressed, not erupted, but aimed with surgical precision at specific strategic targets. The aggression that others told him to manage, he converted into an identity so formidable that his enemies feared the act of opposing him. Your envy, aimed at understanding what you want and building the strategy to get it, becomes a compass. Your anger, aimed at injustice or mediocrity in your own performance, becomes a standard. Your pride, stripped of performance and aimed at genuine excellence, becomes the engine that never stops. Comment: what dark quality in you, if aimed correctly, becomes your greatest strategic asset? Jung called this process individuation, the integration of the full self, light and dark, into a unified identity. Greene called it mastery, the point at which you are no longer at war with your own nature. The man at war with himself is the easiest man in any room to manipulate. He is already divided. The integrated man cannot be divided. His dark side and light side are in the same army, his army. Comment: what would it feel like to stop being ashamed of the most powerful parts of yourself? Greene documented this alchemy in every great figure he studied. The wound became the weapon. The darkness became the direction. Not by pretending the darkness was light, by refusing to pretend it was something to be ashamed of. Shame requires your cooperation. Withdraw the cooperation, and the weapon dissolves in their hands. The man who has looked at his own darkness without blinking cannot be frightened by someone else describing it, because he already knows. He was there first. He stayed longer, and he came back changed. Greene's final teaching: the dark qualities you own become the most legible thing about you, and legible men generate respect. Not the respect of people who approve of you, the respect of people who understand you cannot be played. That man, whole, dark, owned, aimed, cannot be shamed, cannot be leveraged, cannot be stopped. You came into this video carrying shame like armor, but it was never protecting you. It was marking you, telling everyone exactly where to press to make you move. The old you is dead. The man who apologized for his nature, who explained himself to people who were counting his words for weapons, who made himself smaller to fit the comfort of people who feared his size, gone. You are a weapon, pointed at your own future.
Your darkness is part of the weapon, not the handle that others grab, the blade that you aim. You belong to no one, not to their approval, not to their version of who you should be, not to the shame they built from the parts of you they could not understand. You have looked at your own darkness without flinching. That is not something they can undo. Greene spent his life documenting this transformation in the most powerful people in history. Every one of them, at the turning point of their lives, stopped running from what they were. And they became, in Greene's words, who they were, by finally learning who they were. Comment. What part of your darkness are you finally ready to own and aim? Name it below. Claim it. Begin using it. The man who owns his darkness cannot be shamed, cannot be threatened, cannot be stopped by anyone who ever tried to use his nature against him. If something in this video cracked open, if you felt something being named that you have been carrying unnamed, you found the right channel. Subscribe if this serves you. Not because we asked, because you decided. Every week, the philosophy of the integrated man, built for those who are done being manageable. No softness, no performance of wisdom. Just the real mechanics of psychological power, applied to your actual life. Share this with a man who is being controlled by shame. He may not thank you now. He will. The next video goes into the specific dark qualities that history... You will not be comfortable watching it. You will not be able to stop. You made it to the end of this video. Most do not. That tells me who you are. One question before you go. If the parts of you that others called wrong were actually the parts that make you extraordinary, what would you do differently starting tomorrow?